Welcome to Why Stick. This morning, you woke up and checked the weather. Maybe you complained. Maybe you adjusted the thermostat. Maybe you saw a headline about record heat in Spain, or flooding in Germany, or wildfires turning the sky orange over Athens. And you thought, this is bad. This is new. This is something we have never seen before. But your ancestors saw something like this many times, and what they did or failed to do explains everything about where you are right now. The story of climate change is not just a story about carbon and politics and solar panels. It is a story about you, about what your species does when the world stops cooperating. And the answer is far stranger and far more unsettling than you have been told. 74,000 years ago, a volcano erupted in what is now Indonesia. Mount Toba didn't just erupt, it detonated. Scientists estimate it was the largest volcanic eruption in the last two. Ash blanketed the sky across Asia. Temperatures dropped, the tropics turned cold, and geneticist Lynn Jord at the University of Utah, along with other researchers studying mitochondrial DNA, found something chilling in the genetic record. The human population may have crashed to as few as 10,000 individuals. Some estimates go lower, a few thousand. From billions of potential ancestors, your lineage narrowed to a thread, a genetic bottleneck that almost ended. The people who survived didn't survive because they fought the climate. They survived because they moved, they adapted, they let go of what the world used to be and found a way inside what it was becoming. Now fast forward to roughly 11,000 years ago. The last ice age ends. Glaciers retreat. The Sahara, which you know as a vast desert, becomes green. Paleoclimatologist Stefan Krupelin of the University of Cologne has spent decades excavating lake beds in Chad, finding evidence of hippos and crocodiles, fish hooks and pottery in places that are now bone-dry sand. The Sahara was alive. People lived there. And then, slowly, the rains shifted. The green began to shrink. Over centuries, the desert expanded again. The people who stayed died. The people who moved became the ancestors of some of the earliest civilizations along the Nile, carrying their knowledge of water, their tools, their stories into the fertile river valleys. Displacement created civilization. Crisis became the engine of transformation. This is the pattern. This is what your species does. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because right now, for the first time in your species' history, moving is not the answer. There is nowhere to move to. Climate scientist Michael Mann at Penn State has spent years studying what he calls the new abnormal. The data is not subtle. The last decade was the hottest in recorded human history. Europe's heat waves are arriving earlier, lasting longer, and hitting temperatures that the infrastructure was simply never designed for. In the summer of 2003, a heat wave killed over 70,000 people across Europe. That summer is now considered a cool one compared to what climate models project for the 2050s. The outlier became the average. The emergency became the baseline. And your brain, the ancient pattern-seeking machine inside your skull, is still trying to process this as if it were a temporary problem. A bad season. Something that will pass. That instinct is not stupidity. It is evolution. Your ancestors lived in a world where almost every crisis was temporary. A drought. A winter passed. The cognitive architecture you inherited, the architecture that kept your lineage alive through ice ages and volcanic winters, is wired to normalize, to wait, to hope the situation self-corrects. Psychologists call this shifting baseline syndrome. Each generation perceives the environment it was born into as normal, even if that environment is already degraded compared to the one before. You do not grieve the insects your grandparents described. You do not notice the rivers your great-grandparents fished. Your reference point is the world you were handed, not the world that used to exist. And that makes catastrophic change almost impossible to feel in real time. Ancient humans never had to feel it in real time either. The Toba survivors did not watch the sky darken and understand what was happening. The Saharan people did not calculate the parts per million of atmospheric CO2 as the rains stopped. The problem solved itself over generations, or it didn't. And if it didn't, those particular people disappeared from the story. You do not have that option. And more importantly, you understand what is happening. That is the difference that changes everything. Anthropologist Peter Richardson at UC Davis has studied cultural evolution for decades. He argues that what makes humans unique is not our intelligence alone, but our ability to accumulate and transmit knowledge across generations, what he calls cumulative culture. Your ancestors survived climate shifts not because any individual was smart enough to fix the problem, but because communities learned together, passed solutions forward, and built on what came before. Every technology you rely on today, agriculture, cities, medicine, clean water, is the product of 10,000 years of accumulated problem solving handed to you by people who are long dead. The question is whether you can do the same thing for the people who come after you, because what is happening right now is not a mystery. The mechanism is understood. Physicist John Tyndall identified the heat-trapping properties of CO2 in 1859. Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius calculated in 1896 that doubling atmospheric carbon dioxide would raise global temperatures, and he was remarkably accurate. You have known, as a civilization, for over a century that burning fossil fuels at scale would warm the planet. The knowledge was accumulated. The warning was passed forward. And for decades, the decision was made, again and again, in boardrooms and parliaments and living rooms, to wait. To trust that the crisis was not quite real yet. Your brain, remember, was not built for abstract threats. It was built for immediate danger. A predator in the grass, a rival from another tribe, the cold coming tonight. Carbon dioxide is invisible. Its consequences unfold over decades. You cannot smell it or outrun it or punch it. And so the ancient architecture of your nervous system quietly files it under not urgent, even while the temperature records shatter, even while the coral bleaches, even while the cities your grandchildren will inherit are being mapped against sea level projections. Think about what the Saharan people must have felt as the rains came a little later each year. Did they notice? Did they name it? Did they argue about whether it was real? And at what point did the knowledge that things were changing become undeniable, too late to reverse, only early enough to run? You are living inside that moment right now. Except you have something those people never had. You have the data. You have the models. You have 160 years of scientific consensus accumulated precisely so that you could see the crisis clearly, early enough to act. The knowledge your ancestors built, across generations, across disciplines, across continents, was handed to you for this, for exactly this. The heat outside your window today is not an accident. It is not a mystery. It is the result of a decision made slowly, over many decades, by a civilization that understood what it was doing and did it anyway, because the brain that survived ice ages and volcanic winters is very good at waiting, and very bad at acting on a threat it cannot see in a single lifetime. But you can see it now. In the headlines from Athens. In the flood barriers going up in Venice. In the wildfire smoke turning the sun red over cities that have never burned before. In the permafrost thawing in Siberia, releasing methane that has been frozen since the last ice age, unlocking the past to destabilize the future. You can see it. The ancient humans who survived the worst climate events in your species' history did so because they were willing to do something different. To abandon what no longer worked. To move toward what might. They did not wait for the world to return to what it had been. They built something new inside what the world was becoming. This morning, you woke up and checked the weather. You saw what was happening. You understood it. Your ancestors survived because they moved when the world changed. You are being asked to do something harder, to change the world before it's too late to move. The question your species has never had to answer before, until right now, is whether understanding is enough. If you want to keep understanding yourself, subscribe. And if you watched this far, what do you want to understand next?